When I get ready to start a sermon, I always look at the passage and I check to see if there's what I call a wait a minute moment. You're reading through, you ever see that? You're reading through and there's something that maybe confuses you, raises a question, maybe surprises you. You didn't expect that. Again, something that, wait a minute, what's that? Why is that? Well, today we're going to look at the account of Jesus washing his disciples' feet. And in one sense, that right there is the wait a minute. Here you have the creator of the universe, God in human flesh washing people's feet. That right there should stop you and say, whoa, wait a minute, why? But even more than that why is, you ever stop and think how? How was Jesus able to do that? That act, that humble act. Last week I said, we focus so often on what would Jesus do, and that's important. There's a need for that. But underlying that, and even more important, is the question of how did Jesus do it? I see the things he did. I know I should do it. How did he do it? Because I need to know how to do it. And here's the thing. If you think the answer to that question, how did Jesus, in any of the things he did, but certainly how did he wash their feet today, if you think the answer is, well, because he was Jesus, because he was God, well, you might as well tear this page out of your Bible, because there's really no benefit for us other than just a historical fact. It says in the Bible that Jesus was tempted in all ways just as we are, to let us know he went through the same things we did. It was just as hard for him to do things as it would be for us. So how did he do it? So we can see how I can do it. Because if I can figure out, if I can see and learn and apply how he did it, it's going to change things. As we look at what he did today, it's going to change my life if I can come to do what he was doing. It's going to change my relationships, our church, and literally it can impact the world. So we need to know, how did he do it? And along those same lines, we've been asking the question now for a few weeks, why is it so hard to live for God in general? Just in general, as Christians, we're committed to living for him, but so often we're faced with the choice of living for God or living for me, and we choose me. And on the surface, we might say, well, yeah, I'm a little selfish, this or that, but no. Even looking out for my own best interests. On the one hand, you have living for God, the creator of the universe, who sent his son to die for me. He's shown his power, his love, everything. And then you have me. How could I ever be tempted to choose me? And the reason has to be that I'm not seeing God clearly. God in all his glory way overshadows me, but I'm not seeing him clearly. I'm not seeing all his glory. I've got this distorted image because of sin. And as I've been talking about that the past few weeks, I read an article this week. I get an email, and I read one of them, and it was about this idea. A person was talking about a woman that he was working with. This minister was working with a woman, and things weren't going the way she wanted in her life. And here's what she came to say. She says, I guess I've been praying to a God I thought I knew. The more he reveals himself like you're describing, talking to this person, I guess I need to figure out whether I can trust God for who he really is. And then this person says, unless we know who God is as he revealed himself to us and not who he is in our best estimation, we cannot rightly worship God. We cannot rightly praise God. We cannot confess or testify accurately of God, and we cannot confidently pray to God in times of pain and adversity. Now, I've been saying in this series, we can't trust that God. We can't trust to live for him versus me if we don't know who he is. And so in this series, we've been looking at God to try to know him better. At first, his two characteristics that I think are foundational. I've been calling them the lenses for looking at life. The fact that God is in control, first of all. God's in control, and that means he's aware of everything that goes on in our life. He's all wise, and he knows what should be going on, what would be best for us, and he's all powerful, so he's able to put us in situations where the best can come about when we choose the right things and trust him. So he's in control, and then, of course, he loves us. If I can get those two and then look at life through those two lenses, it will change everything. And last week, we looked at living, looking at living, and we looked at the story of Abraham being told to sacrifice Isaac and how God was testing him. And specifically testing this temptation we all have to try to trust in God and something else. We're all tempted. I trust in God, and I got this. It's sort of a backup, but just in case. And that's what God was working on with Abraham. You're like, no, it's got to be God alone, not God and. And I don't know about you, we said, all right, let's really start trying to look at things, choices, living for God, and through these lenses of control and love. Did you try to do that last week? And you just look at things and say, all right, if I trust God, He's in control and He loves me, here's what I need to do. I continue to apply that myself. And here's the thing, I thought I was sort of done, like, all right, God, you tested me once and I got a good sermon illustration, that's really all I need, but apparently He thought I needed some more. And so this week, things have continued. And really just the same things. I talked about, a level of certainty and certainly a level of, finances in the bank account. And they both went down before, and that was a test. Well, they went down some more, and it was another test. And if I focused on those things, my peace went down, my joy went down. But if I focused on God, then it stayed solid. So we looked at living last week. Well, today we're going to finish this series, and we're going to look at loving. And in one sense, loving falls under living. That's true. But I think everyone would say, and certainly Christians should realize, loving deserves its own category, doesn't it? Because Jesus said in John 13, He says, by this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. Of all the things we're told to do, He says, if you do this, they'll know you're mine. And so we're going to look at loving. And we're going to use the story of Jesus washing the disciples' feet. If you have your Bibles, turn to John chapter 13. It's toward the end there, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts. If you want to use one of the blue Bibles, it's on page 763. And again, we're going to look at this account, and we're going to try to look at it through the lenses of God's control and His love and see what it means for us to show love to other people. So, John chapter 13, we're going to focus on the first 5 verses. It says, it was just before the Passover feast. Jesus knew that the time had come for Him to leave this world and to go to the Father. Having loved His own who were in the world, He now showed them the full extent of His love. The evening meal was being served, and the devil had already prompted Judas Iscariot, son of Simon, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under His power, and that He had come from God and was returning to God. So He got up from the meal, took off His outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around His waist. After that, He poured water into a basin and began to wash His disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around Him. So let's look at that in a little detail. It says it was just before the Passover feast. The Jews celebrated 3 main feasts, and of those, the Passover was probably the mainest. It celebrated the deliverance of Israel from Egypt, out of that slavery, with Moses leading them, the 10 plagues, and that last one being the angel of death passing over the whole land. And the Israelites put the blood of a lamb on their door, and He would literally pass over them and wouldn't kill the firstborn. And there are a lot of parallels between that and Jesus' sacrifice for us. And so this was the time that had always been for Jesus to sacrifice for our sins. And look what it says. Jesus knew that the time had come for Him to leave this world and go to the Father. Do you realize what that's saying there? The time had come for Him to leave this world and go to the Father. How was that going to happen? He wasn't taking a red eye. It certainly wasn't traveling first class to leave this world and go to the Father. That's talking about the cross. Jesus knew the time had come for Him to be beaten and tortured, nailed on a cross, and with all the physical pain to suffer the separation from God that we can't even begin to imagine. He knew the time had come from that. Literally, the hour had come. For so long, He had known it was coming, but have you ever been in one of those situations where I know something's coming, but it's not too close, and so, I can deal with it. But once it gets right there, the thing I've been in the back of my mind, it's now in the front. Jesus isn't going to sleep until He's nailed to the cross. He's up. This all is really one big event. He knew the time had come for that. And it says, having loved His own who were in the world, He now showed them the full extent of His love. Some translations say He loved them to the end. This is better. He showed them the full extent. He'd been loving them. The 3.5 years He'd been with this inner group of people, He'd been showing them how much He loved them. But now He's going to show the full extent. And He's going to show there is no limit. He loves them as much as a person can love them. Completely, the full extent of His love. And just stop and think about that. Having loved His own who were in the world, it doesn't say He now, wrote them a poem about how much He loved them. He now told them, I really, really, really love you. It says He showed them. He showed them the full extent of his love. He did something. And what did he do? Well, we're going to see, literally, he washed their feet. But if you want to generalize that, he met their need. He met the need that they had at that moment. We'll talk more about it, but they needed their feet washed. This wasn't like, you're flying on a plane and the people in first class get a nice little warm towel, but you can really get to where you're going without it. They needed their feet washed. The way things were, the way their feet were, and the way they sat and all that. This was a need they had, not to mention the lesson that underlied it. And so Jesus met their need, and that's what showing love is. At its core, showing love is meeting the need of the person that I love. And that's what Jesus is doing here. Verse 2, it says, the evening meal was being served, and the devil had already prompted Judas Iscariot, son of Simon, to betray Jesus. Why does John include that here? Why does he include it here? We're going to see just a little ways down that Judas does leave. Jesus says, someone's going to betray me. Judas goes out and he does it. And here's the thing. John's the last gospel written. People knew what had happened. They knew Judas was going to betray. And so it's not like this is some new piece of information. Why is it included here? Well, John wants to give the setting. He wants us to appreciate how real this is, because we're tempted to think, again, well, Jesus, he did this because he's Jesus, and then, no big deal for him. He's God. John's saying, no, this was a really big deal. Here's Jesus. And look at the people. He's not just that he's doing this thing of washing people's feet. Look whose feet he's washing. And it says, he has loved his own. These are his own, his disciples. But you see that phrase there? He loved his own who were in the world. Did that stop and make you think? Well, of course, where else would they be? In the world. It's not talking their physical presence. The world is set up in the Bible, especially the New Testament, as this set of principles and values and outlooks and practices that's contrary to God. It's God versus the world. And so it's saying, having loved his own who were still a part of that worldly system and worldly view, and you see this all throughout. You see these people's weaknesses and failings, and again, living by the world standards. And matter of fact, right before this, when you read Luke's gospel and you put everything together, right before this, they had been arguing over who was the greatest. Think about it. Jesus is about to die on the cross, and they're like, I get to be the greatest in the kingdom. No, I get to be the greatest. And in fact, as I read through, I'm reading through Matthew, they'd already asked him who's the greatest, and he told them very clearly what it meant to humble themselves. Well, that went in one ear, out the other. And these are the people. And Jesus knows not just, what's been happening, but what's going to happen. He didn't always know the future, but he knows it now. It's going to come up, and he tells them, my greatest hour, I'm going to be arrested. You are going to flee. You're all going to leave me. And Peter's like, no, not me. And you remember? He says, you're going to deny me. These are the people he loves. These are the people he's about to do this to wash their feet, to show this love to. But then out of all that, as bad as that is, you got Judas. Judas has betrayed Jesus. He's already set up the deal. He's got the 30 coins stashed away somewhere. Pretty soon he's going to leave. That's what's happening. That's this group of people that Jesus is going to show this love to. That's how real it is for him. So verse 4, skip down to there. It says, so he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. Now, we all know he's going to wash their feet. That's just extreme enough. But he's not just going to do the act of a servant, the lowest servant. He's going to put on the garb of the lowest servant. I thought about it. It's like, okay, you're going to do the thing. Can you at least, wouldn't you be tempted to, at least I'm going to look like a normal person, not like a servant. I'm going to maintain some level of dignity here. Jesus totally looks like a servant. He goes all out. And then it says after that, he poured water into a basin, and he began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with a towel that was wrapped around him. Stop and think about washing feet in this situation. Who here has ever had their feet washed or washed someone's feet? There's sometimes churches and things like that. Yeah, I'm guessing it wasn't like it was with them. I had an uncle, and he said his church would have a foot washing every once in a while on a Sunday night. I remember him saying people's feet were never cleaner than the night they were having a foot washing service. That's true, isn't it? Isn't that what we would all do? What would you do right before you left for church? you would wash your feet and you put on clean socks. You would have sprayed the shoes. Everything would be as close to perfect as you could get. You don't want anybody washing your dirty feet. It really doesn't compare to what these people, what this was. That they walked through these dusty streets in sandals, open-toed shoes. And it wasn't just them walking. The animals were walking too and leaving behind what animals leave behind. That's what was on their feet. And again, so they had a need. They're about to eat this meal. And they didn't, it'd be bad enough you were sticking your feet underneath the table. No, I mean, they were reclining. Remember, they're right around there. They needed their feet washed. And their feet were dirty. I think I've seen a movie somewhere. He pours a little, water on clean feet and brushes them off with a towel. No, that's not what happened here. Jesus washed their feet. And what we need to get from this, again, it says he showed them the full extent of his love. And the point is, he did what they needed. This is what they needed. That's what love is meeting a need. And Jesus did it without any limits. That's what we're talking about. And this isn't new to us. There's sometimes I talk about something in the Bible and say, wow, I didn't know that was there. But loving others, that one we've heard, right? Well, we know that one. It says in John 15:12, as if there aren't many places, my command is this: love each other as I have loved you. We know that. And the problem is not that we try to love people. We genuinely do. We try to love people, and we just don't do it perfectly. Little human failings, weaknesses, selfish streaks, whatever. I'm trying to love you, and just, it could have been better. The problem is when we, from the outset, rationalize. I don't need to show love in this situation. I don't need to show love like that, and we limit things. We come up with excuses, try to justify, rationalize. Well, in these 5 verses, all the excuses I could think of, in these 5 verses, Jesus shows no, none of those work. What are some reasons when you are faced with a situation, and I love this person, they have a need, I should be doing something, but what are you tempted to think? The first one that came to my mind is, all right, I love people in general, but that one person, that person's just too hard to love. I mean, God, me, whatever, no. I mean, I love everybody else, but you just don't know what that person's like. Well, here's the thing. When we say we love someone, we love someone. We love a person. In fact, so many languages, have you ever studied all these different languages where they don't even use the word love of anything other than people? Now, you can't say I love pizza and love chocolate. That'd take a lot for me to get used to. I'd be able to say I love chocolate. But I can see the reason for it, because you don't really love chocolate the way you love a person. There is a difference there. People are the people, that's who we love, and people have issues. People are hard to love. But whenever you're tempted to think, all right, I'll love everyone, but not that person, that's too far. Jesus loved Judas. And everyone else, even all the rest of his disciples had their issues, but Judas. Have you ever had to love someone who was going to betray you unto death? I'm guessing the answer is no, because you're here. So either you've never been in that situation, or somehow you escaped, which, congratulations, good for you. It's never been that bad. That person wanted me to, was trying to get me killed. So cross off that excuse. I'll love everyone but them. The other excuse that I think we come up with is sometimes we'll say, all right, I'll love in general, but that particular need that person has, that act of showing love, that's just too much. Sorry, I'll do all this, not that. That's too far, it's too much. Well, again, look at what it says in verse 1. In light of, it says Jesus knew the time had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. That means when it says he showed the full extent of his love, it's not just talking about the washing the feet. This continues all the way to the cross. He knew what was coming. So Jesus' love includes both of those. And I think that's important because they're both these two different kinds of extremes of love. On the one hand, the cross is sacrificial love. I love you so much I'm willing to sacrifice. And Jesus, I'm willing to sacrifice my very life. But then on the other hand, the other extreme is this humble kind of love. I love you so much I'm willing to humble myself in this way. And I think some of us struggle with one more than the other. And I know a lot of us, myself, I think at times I struggle more with being humble than I do with sacrificing. At least to that extent. And that was true of the disciples. In John chapter 11, verse 16, shortly before this, Jesus said, I'm going to Jerusalem and die. And Thomas said to the rest of the disciples, let us also go that we may die with him. I think he was genuine, sincere, honest. I think he really meant it. Let's go and let's die with him. But here they are in the upper room. They're eating and they've got dirty feet. They know what's supposed to happen. There should be a servant. It wasn't there. Their feet need washed. Did Thomas jump up and grab a towel? Some water? No. He was willing to sacrifice. He wasn't willing to humble himself. You and I, we can't put any limits, whatever it is. If it needs sacrifice, if it needs humility, whatever it is, that's what it means for me to love. Cross off that excuse. Well, another one, and I've heard this a lot, and it struck me, and I think just this morning I realized, sometimes when something really stands out to you, a negative about someone else, at least I found it's because it's true about me, and I just don't want to admit it. So I'm quicker to see it in you. I've heard this excuse. Well, my task, and without saying it, but it's what comes across, my task supersedes this command to love. Yeah, I know as Christians we're supposed to love, but I'm doing something right now that's more important. Now, I'm not saying you don't ever have some situations where you can't just drop everything, at time, whatever. But in general, no. And here's the thing, it's especially tempting when what we're doing, the task, is truly for God. I'm doing this thing for God, and I've seen, because I'm doing it for God, and it's such a good thing and needs to be done, well, I may not be showing love exactly the way I should. I may not be as patient, as gentle, as kind, but I'm doing this for God, and that's what counts. No. Again, look at Jesus' example. What was he about to do? He was dying for the sins of the world. Have you ever done anything that important? Again, I'm going to assume no. No. Matter of fact, Paul even brings it down several levels. He says in 1 Corinthians 13, talking about this either or, he says, no. It says, if I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I'm only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and knowledge, what a ministry for God. And if I have a faith that can move mountains, how incredible. But I do not have love, I'm nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor, wow. If I give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but I do not have love, I gain nothing. You can't ever say, my task supersedes. It's more important than showing love. And then another one. Well, sometimes I think again, I know I should love, but here's the thing. I've got my own needs right now. I'm suffering. I need someone to show me love. And again, are there times where we're in the crisis moment? And yeah, we need the love. But in general, we got to be real careful and look at this. Are we using that as an excuse? Oh, I need love. Because again, look at Jesus. It says he knew that the time had come for him to be beaten and tortured and go to the cross. If there's ever anyone that could say, hey, I need some love right now, can't really show it to you, it was Jesus, but still he did. And any excuse we can come up with is answered. We're to show love. And this is the kind of love we're to show. A person, an author in town I mention frequently, John Lynch, one of the authors of True Faith, he had this to say about this love that Jesus is talking about, telling us we need to show. He says, it is love that does not demand its own rights, that gives up self-actualization to do the hard work of discovering what will bring the best out of the other, even if they're an unappreciative spouse or child or boss. It is love that trusts its needs will be met, so it's free to give up demanding the terms and furniture of what being taken care of should look like. Instead, this love looks through the gray haze, through the imperfect world, through the loss, through the broken dreams, through the injustice, through the shame, with a delightful, almost selfish realization that it is the only life worth living. The only life that will ever satisfy and make life worth living. It's that love. That's the love that Jesus is saying we need to show to other people. Well, again, it raises that question, okay, how do I do it? How do I show that love? Well, how did Jesus show it? Despite those same excuses we just saw. And here's the thing. I don't know about you. As I thought about those excuses, I thought about, well, this person, that situation, this excuse applied. This person, that. Jesus had them all right there. Every one of them. And he still was able to. How was he able to? Well, look at verse 3. We skipped over that as we went through and looked in depth. Verse 3 says, Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power and that he had come from God and was returning to God, so he got up. You see that? He knew these things, so he got up and washed their feet. Saying that's how he was able to do what he did. He knew something in his mind, and it enabled him to do this thing. And it's what we see over and over when we look in the Bible. Again, this pattern of it starts in our mind, what we understand about things, what I believe to be true about the world. It impacts my heart, my general direction, my foundational desire in life. And then out of that comes my will, the choices that I make. Jesus knew something, so he did something. Well, what did he know? And I tell you what, I would love it to say, wrap up this series. Jesus knew God was in control and he loved him, so he did this. It'd be just so nice and tidy and neat. It doesn't say that, but yet when you look at it, it does. Because look, it says he knew what? First of all, he knew two things. First of all, the Father had put all things under his power. Stop and think about that for a minute. He's about to go to the cross. You have this situation that, at least on the surface, it looks like the most crazy, out-of-control event in the history of mankind. The creator of the world is nailed to a cross by his creations, by his creatures. What could be more crazy? But this is saying, no, things are not out of control. It says he knew the Father had put everything under his power, control. And then it says he knew he had come from God and was returning to God. What's that mean? He had come from being with God. Before Jesus came down to earth as a man, he had been with God the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit. From time, even before there was time, before God created, there wasn't even time. He'd always been with God. He was going back to being with God, being in relationship. And not one that was, affected by being here. It was back to the way it had always been. He knew that. Well, what's true about any relationship, and certainly God's relationship with himself? Love. We talk about the fact, it says God sent his only son. What's the point? And we all look at it, well, would you be able to sacrifice your son? No, because you love your child. You love your son. It's the same thing. That's what's meant to be conveyed by the Son of God. God, the Father, loves him. And so you see these two things. Control and love. Now, it's a little different for him because it says all things have been put under his power. He was in control, and you and I, we're never in control. But isn't it better? Wouldn't you rather have God in control than yourself? Sometimes we think, no, but truly, he knows way more than I do. He's way wiser than I am. Yeah, it's better that God is. But there's these two things again. Jesus was able to show this love because he knew God was in control and loved him. Well, again, take a step, dig deeper. How exactly does that help? Because it's true, but how does it help? Well, ask this question. Love is meeting the needs of others. Why do we sometimes struggle with that? Again, I know I should meet the needs of the people around me, my wife and kids and friends and family. I know I should, but I struggle. Why do I struggle? What is it that makes it tough at times? Of all the potential reasons, I think the foundational one is I'm afraid my needs won't be met. I struggle to meet your needs because I'm afraid my needs won't get met. And it's not always, or at least aren't being met, it's not always a one-to-one direct thing. It's not like I've got a plate of food and you're hungry, and if I give you some of mine, I'm afraid I won't be full. That's direct. Sometimes it's more, I've got this foundational need, and it's just keeping me from showing you love in some other unrelated way. But still, I'm more worried about that. I need this need met, then I'll be able to help you. A little bit like anger. How often do we get angry, at a certain thing, but really the cause of our anger is something totally different. That's just what set us off. Well, it's the same thing with this. I know there's a need. Meeting your need isn't going to directly affect my need, but I'm just worried about that need getting met. I got to get it met first. How would it change things if we trusted God's in control and he loves me? God knows about that need. He's totally aware, completely wise. He knows how things should be different, and he's so powerful, he's able to bring things about that, again, if I act out of trust in him, the best thing will come about, and that's what he wants because he loves me. How would it change things if I look through those lenses? Here's the thing, like I said last week, I believe so much we all want this to be true. We want it to work this way, that God will meet my needs so I can meet your needs. Oh, I want that. I hear about people, it sounds so good. Oh, I want that in my life. I want that to be true. But there's that part of us that says, I want to see it first. God, you meet my need first. Then I'll meet that need of that person. Let me see. It's all going to work out for me. Then I'll meet that person's need. That's not how it works. Because that's not trust. Again, Paul said in Ephesians, I want you to know God's power and know his love. And that word, that gnosko, I want you to experience it personally. But that doesn't happen first. You don't experience and say, all right, now that I see it, everything's fine. Now I'll do this thing. No, he says, trust God and do the thing. Whether it's obeying him in general, whether it's loving him specifically, trust God first, then you'll see it. And then you'll know it. That's what needs to happen. We'll skip down to verse 12. It says, when Jesus had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. Do you understand what I've done for you? He asked them. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you should also wash one another's feet. Now, does that mean literally do that? Maybe in some cases it does. Just the act itself needs to happen. But more often than not, it means you need to see what need there truly is and meet it. He says, I have set for you an example, and again, not just of what to do. So often we look at Jesus' example. Well, there's what I should do. What would Jesus do? I should do it. But how? I've set you an example of how to do this thing, which seems so tough, and it is. That you should do as I have done for you. I tell you the truth, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you shake your head and nod fervently while the preacher talks about them. Isn't that true? Yeah. Oh, man, this is so right, Steve. We need to all be doing this. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you sit in a small group and talk about all the ways you could do these things. No, he says, now that you know, you're going to be blessed if you do them. If you do the things that need done to the people you say you love. And so, how do I do that? What do I need to do personally to put this into practice? Again, ask yourself some questions. First of all, is there a situation where I'm not showing love? Where I'm not meeting a need? Either it's been there for a while and I haven't been showing it, or it's just I'm becoming aware of it. It hasn't happened yet. Is there a situation? And at first I'm just going to rattle off all these examples, but I don't know what they are. Think of people. Think of people and then ask yourself, what do they need and how can I meet that need? How can I show love? And here's one thing that came to mind. One way that at least myself, I think we're so good at trying to squirm out of things, partially obeying God. Well, here's something to watch, because so often they're like, all right, I know I need to show love, but, and I try to limit it a little, and like with my kids, I need to show love. That means spending time with them, and, my youngest daughter, Darren, her things she wants to do, they're like all over the board, run here and throw this and do this. And so often I'm tempted like, hey, Darren, I love you. Let's spend some time together. Let's sit down here and watch a movie with your dad. That's just nice and relaxing and easy. And no, I need to show love the way she needs to see love. My older daughter, she'd be more likely for the movie sometimes, but at times she just needs to talk. She needs me to listen. And at first I'm tempted, I'm working on my computer and, oh yeah, that's nice. Yeah, that's not love. You close that, you set it down, you focus. Whatever they need, it's not what you're just willing to offer. So that's the first thing. Is there a situation? Second, what need of mine am I afraid isn't being met or won't be met? If I know I should, here's what it is. And again, so often we know what to do. But something comes in my mind. But, all right, why? What am I worried about? What am I afraid won't happen, won't get done? What need of mine do I feel is threatened here? And again, it may not be direct. I give you half of my candy bar. I won't have a candy bar. Yeah, that's true. But sometimes it's just deeper. I'm struggling with this. I can't show you love right now. What is it? And then how can I look through God's control and love? How can that we've been talking about now for 3 weeks, how can it make a difference in this specific situation that, all right, if I truly live my life according to this principle, if I trust in the fact God's in control and he loves me, how will it change things? And here's the thing, we need to be thinking about this now before you're maybe right in the situation. It says here, Jesus, it doesn't just say Jesus happened to remember these things at that moment, so he did it. It says he knew it. This was in his mind prior. Think about these things now. Lay a foundation for those times when you need to show love. And then the last thing, and this one doesn't continue. Those three sort of build on each other. This is separate. Do I have a relationship where people can show me love? You know what? This is all about us showing love, but you know what goes hand in hand with that? Someone showing love to me. And Jesus wants that just as much as he wants us to show love, he wants us to receive love. But I need to be in the kind of relationship where I let someone do that, where I let them know what my need is and that it's okay for them to show love to me. And that may make you more nervous than anything I've said today. But it's true. And God knows it's true. And it's why it's here. And you're not going to be the person God wants you to be if you don't allow people to show you love. And maybe that's the needs that well, my needs might not get met. Well, maybe God wants to meet those needs through someone else, not just directly from him. You got to let those people in. And what's it going to look like when I do that? I love to end this way. When we do this, what will it look like? Well, verse 17 again. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. It will change your life. It will impact your life in a blessing kind of way. I said above, if we learn how Jesus did this and we start doing it, it's going to change, first of all, me. Stop and think. Are you going to be just a totally different person if you're showing this kind of love? Yeah. And that last thing, if you open up to receive this love, how's that going to impact you? And then again, love means someone else. It means a relationship. So it's going to impact my relationships. Is there any relationship you can think of that wouldn't be impacted in a positive way by this? And then our church. Jesus wants us together as a group of people. Why? So that we can show love to each other. So we can meet each other's needs. I'm to be looking to meet your needs. And you know what? Everyone's to be looking to meet my needs, to show love. It all goes together. And then I said the world. This can impact the world. Was that just some, grandiose statement? Imagine if the world sees this from us. If the world sees, Christians in general, just start right here with us. Our community sees this church loving just each other to start. Don't you think they'll notice that? Like, wow, those people show love. And look what it happens when they receive love from each other. Look what a difference that makes. That's going to impact people. And so this morning, as we close, praise team's going to come out and lead us in a song. And again, today, wherever you are, if maybe you've never accepted Christ, again, it always starts there. As we talk about these things we should do as Christians, it starts with making that initial commitment, trusting in God's control and love just to forgive me and begin the Christian life. And if you need to talk about that, come forward. People would love to speak with you. Or maybe you're here today and again, I've been living the Christian life, but wow, I need to love different, more, better. And you might make that choice right there, whatever you need to decide, but maybe you want to come forward, whatever it is. Let's stand now as the praise team leads us.